Hello, everyone. This is Ismael Perez, and today I'm going to be doing the interview. So we have in front of me Victoria Reynolds, who just happened to publish another book. She is ahead of me. I love it. She is a huge participant and influencer in the development of the New Earth. Welcome to my show, Victoria.
Thank you. It's so great to see you here, Ismail.
Wonderful. So tell us about this new book that you just released, and what is the name of it?
It's called Recreating Earth. Here, this is my sixth book. And
Nice.
this book is all about what Earth is going to look like once we move through this transition process that we're presently in. And when I call it the transition process, because we're in the transition between realities. Well, those of us who have had our awakening experience and have pulled ourselves up out of the 3D matrix. Some people call it the matrix, some people call it 3D. I've been calling it a fear-based reality for about I've actually been doing this work for about 15 years. And so I call it a fear-based reality, moving from a reality that's based in fear and moving into a reality that's based in love, this beautiful new heart-based reality. And so there are a lot of different terms that people use for these two different realities. Some people call it the matrix 3D. I call it fear-based, and we're moving into what some people call 5D new earth. I call it a love-based, heart-based reality. And so that's what we've been in. And this didn't start 2 years ago. It's so funny. People always say, oh my gosh, just because the Great Awakening started in 2020. Before lockdown, the guidance that I got was that humanity would be asked to go inside and remember who they are. And literally the words that came in were from Source. I work with Source Creator, and God picked the name. God has 1,000 names, and that people would go within and remember that I am. So a lot of people during lockdown went inside and remembered God, remembered love, and started to have their awakening experience. So that was the beginning of the Great Awakening that those of us in the spiritual community, clear back in 2008, that's when I had my what I call my midlife holy shift. Awakening experiences tend to be very uncomfortable, so I call it a holy shift because that's the nice way of saying that. Shift fan in 2008. And but in the spiritual community, we kept saying that the Great Awakening is coming. The Great Awakening is coming. The Great Awakening is coming. And then in 2020, we went, oh my gosh, the Great Awakening is here. And so that's what humanity's been in. And what started this year in 2023 is what I call the mass awakening. So the awakening it's not an event, it's a process. And it has happened in multiple waves starting in the 1960s. And each wave gets a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger and more frequent, just like with the light waves that have been coming in. They come in more frequently and each wave gets bigger. And so now we're moving into the mass awakening that started this year. So this Recreating Earth is all about what Earth will look like once we move through the remainder of this transition process. And the reason I was guided to write this book is people kept asking me, what does New Earth look like? What does it look like? Can you help me envision it? What can I do to help create it? And so about a year and a half ago, I don't write books quickly. So for people that think they can whip out a book in 30 days, it doesn't work that way. It took me about a year. It takes me between 1 to 2 years to write a book.
Mhm.
Hopefully the next one won't take that long. But it's an answer to those questions. What does New Earth look like? What can I do as each of us as individuals? What can each of us do to help create that? And then also it's an answer to what the New World Order. So you have the New World Order and the 2030 agenda. The first chapter in this book is called the New Earth Plan and the 2030 plan. So one of the things I saw a few years ago is the dark side of the contrast. That's my term for it, because human beings on a soul level agreed to learn through the contrast. So the contrast is very present on the planet. The dark side of the contrast does what it does, and the light side of the contrast does what it does. And the dark side of the contrast always works for the light. It exists specifically for us to see the light. So it does serve a purpose. The dark side of the contrast has their 2030 agenda. which can be found on United Nations 2030 agenda. On the surface, it looks fantastic. The way it's written looks amazing. Who wouldn't want to live in sustainable communities and clean water? But the difference is the approach of how they get to that. So the New World Order 2030 agenda is a totalitarianism agenda.
Mhm.
And one of the things I've noticed is the dark side tends to use the word agenda. The light side uses the word plan. So it's a really easy way to decipher the difference. So you hear about the White House Congress agenda. So to watch, if you watch for that word, and you'll start to see that's one of the key words that they use. And God always uses a plan. Mother, Father, Creator. I don't refer to God as a he in the sky because Creator is all that is. And there is a plan. And so the first chapter of this book is dedicated to what the 2030 plan is. And on the surface, it looks very similar. The way that we arrive at the 2030 plan is through the humanitarian heart, humanitarianism, rather than the totalitarianism. That's the plan of the dark side. So there's one chapter that's dedicated to the plan. Then there's an entire a section that's dedicated to the plan, a section that's dedicated to what the new systems will look like. There are 17 systems that are going to be recreated. All the old ones are collapsing. We've known for decades they needed to come to an end, and we are actually watching that happen right in front of our eyes. All the systems are starting to collapse, which is fantastic news for those of us who recognize how vital that is. If we're going to create something new, we have to allow the old to die. It's a cycle of life. Everything is always birthed out of the death of something before it. And the beginning of creating New Earth actually began in 2012. That's when the old reality started going into a nosedive, and the new reality started being birthed and emerging up through the collapsing of the old. And so this year we're really starting to see that. We'll see it more this year and into next year as well. I think by 2025 we might actually start to see the reconstruction take place. So the second chapter, or the second section, is all about what it looks like. The third section is all about what each one of us can do to help create it. And every person's role is vital to the process. For people who go out there and say, well, what can one person do? What's important to understand is that everything that has ever happened on our planet started with one person. One person can change the entire world. And so don't ever question what one person can do, because every person's role is just as vital as every other person's role. Just because you and I have been called and have chosen to step out in the forefront doesn't mean that our roles are any more important than the role of someone who's at home picking up the phone and making phone calls, or running for a school board, or planting a community garden. Every person's role is equally important. And then the last section of the book is filled with resources that people can go to look at and to find where they might fit in to whichever system or program they feel guided to. And so it's really important. People ask me, how do you decide which system to begin the recreation of? And so it's really, really important is that you go inside your heart. What is it that is inside your heart that calls to you the very most? And I know we all want to fix all of them. And there's a burning desire that's inside each of our hearts. In my particular case, it happens to be the entertainment industry. I've known for the last 10 years that I'm moving into the entertainment industry, and that being on camera and writing books is a stepping stone to do that. And so I actually have one of the sections is dedicated to what's going to happen with the entertainment industry. And so every person plays a vital role. And so anyway, so that's what the book is about. And that's what I've been speaking about lately on stage. As we mentioned off camera, I'm in Sedona, Arizona right now. I was part of the Sedona Ascension Conference that happens every spring. That was amazing. I'm actually still here. I'm going to be here for a few more days. just soaking up the spring equinox energy while I'm here. And there's a portal that we're in right now.
Absolutely, yes. That's another place I need to go and check out. But I heard that Mount Shasta is also positioned where a portal is, right? And I'm going to be heading there at the end of June, so I'm excited about doing that. Now, out of the 17 principles that you talked about, the 17 systems rather, can you just give us a sneak peek, just two of those systems and what they are and what they mean?
Sure. So the two that I put the greatest emphasis on, well, actually I put emphasis on all of them, but the two of the ones that are closest to my heart that I seem to write a little bit more about is the education system. So one of the things that I got very clear guidance on, I wrote this book. This book is actually a co-creation with myself, Mother Earth, Metatron. It's called Metatron's Blueprint for a Whole New World. It was also co-created with Yeshua. So those are the members of the team that assisted me in writing this book. This is the first time I've written a book that's channeled in it as a co-creation with non-physical beings. My other books were all written through my higher self and from guidance from source. This one is actually a co-creation with some non-physical beings, which is pretty cool. And I do work very closely with Mother Earth and Mother Source, Mother Creator. And this also brought in Yeshua and Metatron. Metatron brought this through me. It's actually the vision that he gave me of the earth that has already been created in the higher realms, and we are just birthing it through us. It already exists. We just need to manifest it through our consciousness. And so the two systems that I put a lot of emphasis on are education and healthcare. One of the things that Metatron explained is that the word systems is going to be replaced with services. Systems actually were created to systemize the human experience. It's literally taking human beings and putting them on a conveyor belt and systemizing the human experience. And human beings were never meant to be systemized and put in boxes and controlled and we know about the enslavement matrix. Human beings were never meant to be systemized. And so we're replacing systems with services. The healthcare system is going to be replaced with wellness services. And these wellness centers are beautiful. It's not like you walk into a hospital now and it's this big giant box and everybody gets put in their little box, and humanity is going to be pulled out of its boxes. A lot of what we're going to be experiencing in the future is actually circular and dome shaped rather than boxes. So we put in boxes and then we're put on grids, and they built these big tall buildings, and everybody sits in cubicles and these big tall phallic symbols. Yeah, Mother Earth's not very excited about the buildings they built in honor of the phallic symbols. And so we're going to be moving out of boxes and into domes. And one of the reason also with these dome structures is that the energy moves more naturally through circular structures than through boxes. That boxes actually create barriers to energy movement.
Right.
So when we're in these circular structures, these dome structures, the energy actually flows much more freely. So we're going to be moving from boxes and grids into working naturally with the vibrations and the ley lines and the layout of Earth in more circular structures. And the same, so with wellness, if you imagine going into a wellness center, a healing center, it could be a giant dome, and within that dome are circular rooms. And in the center you see trees growing within the structure itself, and a creek running through it, and the waiting room is actually on these beautiful benches within this oasis, rather than sitting in rows of chairs in a waiting room while you're waiting to be treated. And so if you imagine that the center itself is healing, not just the modalities, and the healing actually begins before you even walk through the doors, because energetically you're preparing to walk into this beautiful healing space. And so these cold, hard, lifeless structures that humanity's been living with, we won't be living in these cold structures anymore. We won't be going into these buildings that have no life. And the education models are the same way. The education system is going to be based on a child's natural gifts and propensities, not on the system. The education system exists to support the system. It does not exist to support the child. And so the entire education system is going to be remodeled so that it's in service to the development of the child and based on the child's natural gifts. And in these beautiful structures that are crystal and glass and have greenery in the classroom and outdoors as much as possible. Outdoors will actually become a classroom, and children will learn how to telepathically communicate. They'll learn, if your natural propensity is art, you will learn math through art rather than through memorizing numbers. This memorizing facts just to pass a test is ludicrous. It actually does nothing for the development of the human mind. So the entire model of what education looks like is going to be changing so that it's in service and support to the individual child.
Wow, that is fascinating stuff, and I totally align with all of that. Very similar to the visions that I had of the new Earth, and I am so glad that Metatron was able to bring that to the forefront in great detail in your book. I'm excited about reading your book. Can't wait to read it. So, how long have you been in communication with non-physical beings? At what age did you start? I don't know if I want to use the word channeling, but downloading or connecting telepathically with these beings.
So when I was a child, I didn't telepathically communicate, but I was in communication with my higher self. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't understand all of that until years later, but I had a knowing that somehow I knew things. And I don't know if I told you, I grew up in a polygamist fundamentalist doomsday cult in the mountains of Montana. And yes, polygamy does exist outside of Utah. And in this environment that my husband, as I call him, used to call it patriarchy on steroids, because it was like, man, fundamentalist religion it really is not good for humanity. It does not allow humanity to evolve, and it's very, very controlling of the feminine. And so, but in that environment, and I was being told what to think, and that no stone had been left unturned and no question had been left unanswered, and that they had the answer for everything. But even as a child, it didn't feel right for me. There were questions that I had they couldn't answer. And because they couldn't answer them, they told me that if I asked any more questions, I'd get spanked. So I learned to stop asking questions because it hurt my rear end. But I still questioned, and I knew things. But I didn't know where this knowing came from until years later. When I started communicating with non-physical beings, that actually started in 11/1/2010. I remember the exact date. And it was actually a communication with my higher self. And so I was actually sitting in the bathtub, and I heard a very clear message. It was my voice, which I'm not hearing voices. I don't hear other people's voices in my head. I think what's important for people to understand is that our higher self acts like a universal translator. So my higher self translates the messages that come through, and they come through in my own voice. So I was laying in the bathtub, and I heard this voice that said, "I am you in the fourth dimension, and our worlds are about to collide." Laying in the bathtub, and I was like, okay. I'd never heard the term dimensions. And so I had no idea what that meant. And our worlds are about to collide. I have to tell you, scared the crap out of me, because I grew up with a belief that Planet X was going to smash into planet Earth, and the only people who would survive were 144,000 people. And of course, we, of the 144,000 people at the cult that I grew up with, were the only ones that would survive. So I immediately went to a total PTSD panic attack, which I've learned how to work through, but I grew up with so many of these doomsday stories that every time I heard one, literally I would have a whole PTSD attack.
Mhm.
So I'm laying in the bathtub going, having this PTSD moment. And then I came back to my senses and I said, wait a minute. If another planet were going to smash into Earth, I think we'd know about it by now. Maybe not in the 1960s when I first heard the story, but come on, it's 2010. We would know if there was another planet smashing into Earth. And so then I brought myself back to calm and I said, okay, explain. And what I heard was the fourth dimension is going to be converging with the third dimension.
Okay.
And that is all for now. So it was just this very sense of calm of, oh, okay, it's not like the world is coming to an end in 2012 and these planets are going to smash together. And so the next morning I got up and more information started coming through. I called up a friend of mine, and I said, I got this message last night about the fourth dimension and crashing into the third dimension or converging with the third dimension. No, I don't even know anything about it. She goes, oh yeah, everybody knows about that. Like, okay, everybody doesn't because I've never heard this before. So that was the first message that came in. And then it just started flooding in. And so what happens is that the beings up there get really excited when someone's channel gets turned on, or when someone's
Very true.
vision gets turned on is a better way of putting it. So I don't use the term channel, although it is a great way to explain it because it's like changing the channel on a radio. If you think of like the radio waves starting here at this lowest vibration, and then you can tune the channel to higher and higher and higher vibrations. So it technically is like tuning up the channel. That's just one term for it. It's a really easy way of explaining it. For me, it's more of what I refer to as conscious communication, telepathic communication, because it is all telepathic. I see visuals and I get words that go with those visuals. It's packets of information that are given to me. So I remember one morning that what had happened is that one of the first messages that came through was that the grid around the planet had been messed with. And that there were some 5s and 2s that had been manipulated enough that the guardians could not see past this fake picture that had been placed around the planet. They couldn't actually see. Okay, so here's an example. Behind me,
that was a negative fence that was implemented by the negative aliens. By the way.
Yeah, and they actually painted a really beautiful picture. So the guardians had no idea how bad it was down here. So one of the ways of explaining that is behind me is a it's a background, right? I'm traveling right now. So behind me is behind my green screen is a kitchen and all this other stuff. But my tribe really likes it when they see my studio behind me. So I took a picture of my studio and that is my backdrop. I carry it with me every place I go if I don't have a pretty backdrop. And so basically what the dark side did is they painted a really beautiful picture over the grid. So the guardians had no idea how bad it had gotten down here. And they weren't able to communicate with all the volunteers who had come here for the specific purpose of recreating Earth and bringing humanity out of this dark, fear-based reality. So when each one of us start turning on that ability to communicate, they get really, really excited. And there was one morning I was standing in my bathroom and literally had 10 different people in my head. And I said, stop. I can't hear you all at once, one at a time, please.
Right.
They were so excited to be able to communicate. Well, what's happened since the 3D, 4D convergence that actually occurred on December 18th, 2012. It woke me up from a deep sleep. What I heard was convergence complete. So that's when the convergence of 3D and 4D completed. It was in that window between 12/12 and 12/21 of 2012. That's really what happened in 2012. When people think nothing happened in 2012, everything happened in 2012. Exactly. We brought an entirely new level of ability to create consciousness into the human experience, and bringing 4D into the human experience has made it easier for humanity to cross that bridge into this fifth dimensional reality that we're being drawn into. It's actually here. It's not up there. It's actually within our own consciousness. And
Right.
so, which is heart-based, so the heart has been being activated. Well, when 4D converged with 3D, it made it possible for so many other people's spiritual gifts to start getting activated, because those gifts are actually activated within the 4D.
Absolutely. And that actually aligns with my information in my channeling that around 2012, the frequency fence that was put there in place by the negative alien agenda was dissolved when anchor points on the earth were once again able to communicate with their celestial counterpart. Because I've always believed that our higher selves are the guardians. See, we exist here, but we also exist up there. So when that fence was broken, that's when we're able to transmit or receive the information downloads from our higher selves as the guardians, of the universe. It makes total sense. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I've always believed that 2012 was definitely a demarcation point that led into 2020, which is what initiated the Great Awakening.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and many people were expecting something physical to happen, but people fail to realize that everything first takes effect in the subtle levels of reality, in the ethers, before it trickles down into the physical. So now what we're about to witness and experience in the next, I would say probably at the beginning of next month, would you say that maybe this spring is going to be the catalyst that is going to set the chain of reactions that is going to lead towards the total disintegration of the old paradigm and the allowance, or as you would call, the emergence of the new paradigm to rise, would you say?
Yeah, and it's actually already started. So a lot of what's happening on the planet right now, I was shown 10 years ago. I actually have all this stuff in notebooks, but I never told anyone because I thought they would think I was crazy. And
Yeah.
also because it takes so long in the human concept of time, it takes so long for what occurs energetically to manifest physically. On a collective scale, it takes 2 to 3 years for what occurs energetically to physically manifest. And that also is determined by our own resonance. Our resonance is actually what draws this forward. So the longer we stay in anger, againstment, judgment toward what has been and toward what presently is, the slower the new world manifests through us. So we have to take our focus off blame, anger, judgment, resentment. Those are all fear-based energies. So as long as we hold ourselves in those fear-based energies, we actually slow the process of it emerging through us, which is one of the reasons it's taken so long. So the light waves coming in, for example, I started seeing those in 2013. And what we call the solar flash, the great flash, the flash of light. The guidance I got at the beginning of this year, is my source creator was calling it the flash of brilliance, that people's minds would start to wake up and they have these like, oh, aha, moments of brilliance. So this flash of light that wakes people up and they have this flash of brilliance, that's what's beginning to occur. Each one of these light waves as they come in make us more brilliant. Then we are actually all brilliant. Human beings are some of the most brilliant creatures in the entire universe. They just have never been taught that. And so and these light waves are naked to the human eye. So people think they're looking outside and they're expecting to see a flash of light. They're gamma waves. We don't actually see them with these eyes, but our pineal gland recognizes them, and these light waves are activating our light bodies. So yeah, so it does take a while to manifest, and that's why I wanted to let people know this recreated Earth already exists. We just birthed it through us, through our own individual and collective consciousness. And yeah, and this year, what I was shown back in 2020 is that March 2023 was a tipping point.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we're starting to see that. And so for people who are concerned about Mr. T's arrest, let's put it that way, understand that actually is part of the plan. And to not freak out about it, because that actually is part of the plan that was put into place in order for certain things to occur that need to occur with it looking like he's out of the picture. And so
Hmm.
be cool about it, right? Don't, all of you watching, don't freak out if suddenly he ends up in a cell somewhere, because that is part of the unraveling of the old paradigm. And it needs to happen that way. That what's happening right now on the side of light, the plan of the side of light, is planned down to the very microsecond.
Hmm.
And it is, we are seeing the end of this ancient game
Mhm.
playing out. It isn't the last 3 years or the last president or the last 2 decades. The ascension began in 1963.
Yeah,
Love started
that's
coming back to the planet in 1963. So we've been in the ascension process for 60 years. Now, don't get frustrated, everybody, because time has been speeding up. So
mhm.
it's not going to take another 60 years. We are in a quantum leap. This quantum leap actually started. I remember hearing that term back in 2008 when I first started having my experiences. What I was being told is that humanity was going through a quantum leap. And you're going to like this. One of the visuals that came with it is, if you imagine time, of course, is not a line. It's actually a field. But if you imagine time as a line, it's like a quantum leap looks like taking the time and folding it. So there's like a leap in time. And that's what we're going through now, is this a leap in time. And so it's not going to take another 60 years. So don't freak out, everybody. We're actually in that time leap right now.
Yeah, and it's 1963 is also around the time that our astronomers started to detect the solar system entering the beginnings of the photon belt. And they did say it was going to be a process that takes 60 some years to fully emerge in the photonic field that aligns to the central sun of our galaxy. So would you say that we're almost fully emerged?
Yeah, and that's also when they started talking about the fourth dimension, and they were talking about the age of Aquarius. It all started then. And now, 60 years later, we are actually in the age of Aquarius, according to astronomers, I guess. So, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Astrologers?
Astrology, Vedic astrology, that we're now in that age. And that is the age of light. And there are some people out there who are like, oh, these are all new age. These are not new age terms, people. Like, these are terms that existed long before the new age movement.
Mhm.
The concept of new earth, that's as old as the New Testament itself. What's important for people to understand is we're not creating a new earth. We're not going to a new earth. We're not going to a different planet. We're not getting on a spaceship, and the Guardians aren't going to pick us up and lift us up and take us someplace else. We are being lifted up here. The rising up, the ascension, is actually an ascension of consciousness that exists within our minds and within our hearts. It's not going someplace. And we are recreating Earth in the way she was always intended to be, as Gaia's garden. We're going back to the garden and back to peace and prosperity. And it's not the same as going backwards. We are moving forward into the divine creation that Earth was always meant to be. We are going forward into the divine creation human beings were always meant to be. If you imagine a caterpillar was always meant to be a butterfly, it's the same way. We're not going back to being caterpillars because we were born as caterpillars. We're moving forward into this beautiful emergence butterfly we were meant to be. The planet herself is moving forward in this beautiful emergence of this planet of peace and paradise she was always meant to be.
Absolutely, totally aligns. And I've always believed the same thing, Victoria, that the new earth is here. It's just a vibrational frequency away. And when we raise our frequency to match that of the new earth, that's how we enter the new earth. And it's happening for many of us,
Right now.
as I
Yeah. And those of us that know about that, we're in it. It's like, woo, we're here. Like, I look outside, and this planet is one of the most beautiful planets in the entire universe. Why in the world would we want to leave it? We just,
Well,
and
it's
so
a
that's
living
what we're
river.
doing.
You know, we house the best genes and genetics from, and not to mention the DNAs and floras and faunas from across the entire universe is in one place. So it is a showcase planet, and that's why it's probably the most beautiful, spectacular planet in the multiverse, I would say,
Yeah.
because it's the most diverse as far as the ecosystem and life forms are concerned. Do you have any parting words before we end our segment here? And where can people find your new book?
Oh, they can find it on my website at victoriareynolds.com, or they can bypass my website and go straight to Amazon. Although, of course, I would love people to come to my website because I do have some other books there. I have other gifts there. I have a free book that is all about the ascension process and what's happening on the planet right now. And on my, they can find me on my YouTube channel. But the best place to find it, of course, is going through my website. I have a page that's dedicated just to this book.
So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the link in the description on this video, so that way people could directly have access to your website.
Okay. And then just with parting words, I think it's just really, really important to remember that our vision creates this reality. So the more people who focus their vision on creating new earth, the faster we manifest it. The more we take our vision off of the past, and take our vision off the chaos that's happening in the present. That doesn't mean to not be in the present, because this present moment is where we actually create from. The past is just a memory and the future is still a dream. The place we create is from here, but we create that future by what we envision in the present. So stay focused on the vision and not on the stories that are swirling around us. And the more of us who focus on that vision, the sooner we make it manifest through each of us. And stay in your heart. And everything that happens around you, always ask, how can I see this through the eyes of love? How can I love this? How can I see this the way Creator sees this? Always with love. And together we can see it through.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. It's always fun to catch up with you.
Thank you, sister. It's nice to interview somebody. Finally, I'm always on the other side of the spectrum, but this is awesome. You know, people need to know this stuff, and it's always a pleasure. Victoria, my sister in the light. We will talk soon.
Yes.
God bless. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.